Hey, everybody. Welcome to a new series that we're starting. It is a 30-minute project breakdown series where we basically go through the docs or white paper of a new project that we're interested in or that a lot of people are talking about and try to break it down in 30 minutes, do a bit of a deep dive without kind of taking too long. And this is the first episode, so we'll see how it goes. And hopefully you guys enjoy. And if you'd like more of them, we'll definitely make a lot more. And you can comment down below if there's any specific projects you want us to do in the future. Today, I'm here with Mike, and we are going to be talking about Magic or Treasure, this new Arbitrum gaming project that is getting a lot of hype, and both Mike and I are very bullish on it at the moment.
Yeah, it's been really cool. I mean, we talked about Magic, I think like 2 weeks ago almost, when the price was at like $3 or $4, and now we're starting to see it. I think it's hovering right at like 570 today.
Yeah, let me pull up the chart real quick while we're here. It actually just yesterday it kind of went from it was like 450 I think in the morning, and it went like all the way to 570. It's 568 right now. Yeah, beautiful looking chart right there. So yeah, obviously it's been doing really well. I think we talked about it like first 2 weeks ago, right? Or a week or two ago. So yeah, let's get right into it. So we're not going to go over the entire like white paper and every single thing. We're just going to go over the things that we think are kind of more relevant and kind of give our thoughts. So I'll start off just by reading here. So what is Treasure? Treasure is a decentralized NFT ecosystem on Arbitrum that is built specifically for metaverse projects. Every project listed on Treasure's marketplace utilizes Magic in their respective metaverses, with each community inventing its own lore and storytelling for this resource. Magic, the native token of Treasure, is the sole currency for marketplace transactions. In this way, Magic acts as a reserve currency for the entire web of metaverses connected under the Treasure umbrella. So the way Mike and I have kind of been talking about it a little bit is you can almost think of Magic or I should say Treasure as this L0 for gaming, crypto gaming projects. In the same way that we just did a podcast where we talked about the Cosmos ecosystem and how it's like an L0, which by the way, there is is it a rumor or is it confirmed, Mike, that they're potentially going to make their own like IBC chain on the Cosmos ecosystem? Is that confirmed?
I believe it's confirmed. Yeah.
Yeah.
In their Discord, one of the founders mentioned that they are actively building it. It's in there. I believe it. They mentioned in the white paper too, but he did confirm it in the Discord that they are actively working on it. So.
Okay, perfect. So is the L0 for gaming, do you think that's an accurate description of somewhat like a good metaphor for describing what they're trying to do?
Yeah, that's a good comparison for sure. Yeah. I think like L0 / like gaming studio is one aspect of what they're trying to do. So yeah, it's pretty fair.
Yeah, and then the Magic token is basically, like it says here, the sole currency for the marketplace transaction. So all the different, for people who are more familiar with gaming, like you have Steam, for example, right? And on Steam, you have big developers and indie developers and all types of different game studios that sell their games on there, and Steam gets a cut in that case, but obviously people just pay in dollars. Well, in this case, they would make their own kind of Steam quote unquote marketplace, but you would pay in Magic instead of like another currency. So let's keep moving here. So Treasure projects are linked narratively and economically through Magic. The DAO uses Magic emissions to grow new projects and continue supporting more mature ones. The central metaverse in Treasure is a place called Bridgeworld, where Magic is emitted and harvested. Bridgeworld utilizes a 3-part resource economy. Magic, which is what they call power, Treasure, which is the NFT and resources, and Legions, which is NFTs and players. And so these are kind of the 3 different aspects. And if you think about a game, right, you have like resources in a game, you have players in a game, and then you have like this in-game currency, which they would consider power. Legions use treasures to mine for Magic and build larger forms of infrastructure and equipment. Magic is the resource that allows Legions to quest and craft new items using treasures. The relationship between treasures and Magic is the equilibrium underpinning Bridgeworld. So, magic is an increasingly scarce resource needed to power on, in quotes, treasures and allow them to function as productive assets. Treasures produce the instruments and materials needed to continue mining magic. This dance between treasures and magic forms a base layer for the metaverse on which other metaverse economies can be built. So, they're trying to build like back to the L0 analogy, they want to build a base layer for all of these different metaverses and games to potentially be built on top of and be completely interoperable between all of them. Do you have anything to add there, Mike? Because I know you've been like deep diving more on this kind of aspect of it.
Not right here. In the next section, we can talk a little bit more about it, in the vision and mission part. But yeah, this is the next section is where they start to like really dive into some of the finite details that makes this project super interesting.
Okay. So, vision and mission. The Treasure DAO, governed by magic holders, oversees the project. The goal of Treasure is to allow communities to bootstrap new decentralized metaverses. We believe that metaverses are community written stories and resources are threads by which the fabric of the metaverse is sewn. So let me read that again because that's kind of important. We believe that metaverses are community written stories and resources are threads by which the fabric of the metaverse is sewn. The DAO votes on which projects onboard magic distribution and revenue sharing agreements for the marketplace. So basically, games would, pitch the DAO and magic holders, and then they would vote on which games get into the marketplace and into the broader ecosystem. Treasure has enjoyed a strong grassroots community in its brief history. Over time, we expect the DAO to cultivate a much larger ecosystem with multiple product offerings. In 2022, the DAO will be launching a generalized NFT marketplace transacted in ETH as an additional revenue source. Projects on this marketplace will not be related to Magic or Bridge World. The marketplace will simply provides the DAO with additional runway to continue supporting growth of the overall Treasure ecosystem. So that's interesting too. So they're going to have a marketplace where you only pay in magic, and that is like part of their specific like treasure ecosystem, but they'll also have a separate marketplace that people can buy in ETH that basically won't be as part of the core thing, but will have additional revenue.
Right. So this is where it starts to get interesting because they have their official NFTs. Like they have ones coming up like Joyers and I think Toadstools is another one where these ones are directly integrated utilizing magic, and then they have ones that are derivatives that are going to be launching on Trove but aren't directly related to the project but have the potential eventually long term to somehow join the ecosystem determined by the DAO. So they have kind of like this two-pronged thing, right? Where they have like their main thing with their Bridge World and Legions and this in-game economy that they're trying to build. But then they also have this potential where it's like, okay, like we're trying to diversify our treasury. We want to make sure that we have runway on this project. We're trying to compete basically in the NFT like market, but they have this way of like kind of vetting projects, and they get more into it down the road. We'll dive more into it in the white paper of how they're kind of creating like unique differentiating ways to grow their marketplace and compete with things like OpenSea and I guess if you consider looks. But yeah, it's cool what they're trying to do, and I think like this aspect of it is something that a lot of people don't really realize yet about Magic. So
yeah, so they have Treasure, which is their core marketplace, and then Trove, where people can also buy NFTs in ETH. So it's like a OpenSea competitor.
yep.
Very interesting. Okay. All right. Over time, Treasure hopes to become the beacon of decentralization across the entire NFT ecosystem. The DAO will begin building decentralized competitors to existing NFT products, using this revenue to jumpstart new projects and continue growing older ones. Magic acts as a flywheel to increase decentralization in the metaverse and develop decentralized crypto economic primitives that can function as real world economic assets. One thing that I really like about the potential of Trove, the marketplace, is that ETH is still by far the dominant NFT chain, right? Even though you have like Solana or Avalanche and others that have NFTs, and they definitely have volume, but nowhere near close to ETH, obviously. And it's kind of incredible because despite the fact that Ethereum gas fees are so ridiculous, tons of retail users are still on like Ethereum NFTs. That's where the money is. And a lot of them have like tried making the jump to Solana, for example, where the fees are practically zero or like literally pennies. But it hasn't taken off in the same way. Why OpenSea hasn't expanded to Arbitrum, which is ETH2, I don't know. It seems like the most obvious play to onboard a lot more users, because anybody who uses Arbitrum knows that it's extremely fast and cheap. And so if Trove can say, hey, we're still like an Ethereum NFT marketplace, you pay in ETH and all of that, it's just we have way cheaper gas fees and it's way faster. I think they have a real chance at taking some of that market share from OpenSea.
Totally. And we were talking about it a little bit before with Cosmos IBC, where there's not really a huge NFT ecosystem over there yet. So, this to be determined, but if they are able to kind of bridge that gap and become like the NFT place on Cosmos across all those different L1s, it's a lot of money that could potentially they could be capitalizing on.
Especially if a big part of the 2022 narrative is like the IBC, the inter blockchain connectivity protocol. It's or communication protocol, sorry. And Cosmos. If these guys can be like the premier NFT marketplace for that, and then also operate on Arbitrum, that's going to be a big advantage that they have over someone like OpenSea.
Right. And final thing on that, on the Solana point, Solana was very good early on. Like we were very early to that and did very well. But the thing with Solana now is that so many people have come over, especially from like the flipping communities, from like sneakers and stuff. People are starting to create bots and all that, all these different tools where minting stuff is nearly impossible. With Arbitrum and Trove, what's really cool is that the ecosystem is based around pretty much free mints. So even if you don't have a lot of upfront capital, the barrier to entry is so low for a lot of these things that it's like, okay, like you can get in on these discords and get a whitelist playing like these random games that are super easy to do. It's not like a massive grind. So you get one of these things, one of them does really well, then you have some capital to play with. So it's pretty interesting compared to other chains.
Trove has its own whole separate white paper, so we may do like a separate episode going into Trove. But yeah, that's an important part to understand for people looking at Magic. So we'll move on from Trove. Let's get in here. So community. Treasure is a fair launch, community-driven project. The vast majority of Treasure's team members came directly from the community, inspired by Treasure's ethos of building in the open. The DAO has established a framework by which the community can build alongside the team and receive rewards in Magic for developing key parts of the ecosystem, example, tooling, lore, quests. These incentives deepen Magic's network effect by aligning broader ecosystem by aligning the broader ecosystem and incentivizing other communities to build on top of Treasure. Every item in the Treasure ecosystem, whether it's legions, treasures, and magic, was distributed for free. That's like you mentioned, like a lot of these NFTs, I mean, it's free. You literally just get this stuff. I mean, we talked about on the last podcast, someone sold a legion for $7 million that they got for free. That's the kind of, obviously, like that's a one-off. You don't expect that to happen on every single one. But I mean, a lot of these NFTs are worth a crazy amount of money, and they were minted for free. That's really, really, really awesome. The other collections on Treasure's marketplace were also free to mint, fair launch projects. Moreover, Treasure itself is open source. The marketplace quests and lore are publicly hosted projects to which anyone can contribute. The DAO believes that metaverse assets become valuable because of the work that users put into acquiring them. Moreover, metaverses need fair launch origins and decentralized decision-making to sustain community participation over the long term. The genesis story of the project has attracted collaborators who align with our vision of community-run decentralized metaverses. In December 2021, the DAO voted to approve strategic partnership with 1KX, an early-stage investment fund that shared Treasure's belief in grassroots building. 1KX spearheaded a network of strategic investors who enabled the DAO to diversify its treasury and rapidly scale the project. So they've partnered with an investment fund that is going to help them essentially bootstrap a lot of these different projects that they want to work on and work with. And people can come and like pitch the DAO on different games and projects they want to build in the Treasure ecosystem. Okay, I think we covered the broad DAO mission pretty well in the first half here, about 15 minutes in. So in the second half, I wanted to go over a bit of the roadmap, which they've already discussed, and then the liquidity aspect, which is kind of the major innovation that they've created. So let's go over the roadmap real quick. So they launched in September of 2021 last year. We'll just very quickly go over this. They obviously launched the magic token, the fractionalization of treasure bags. Greater than 80% of the magic is locked in single-sided staking contract to earn Legion NFTs. This is similar to kind of how people will lock Curve for voting rights. It's very similar there, where people can lock their magic to get Legion NFTs. Novel approaches to incentivize LP and abstract away complexity. This is something we're going to get into in a minute. Introduced and educated a new wave of users to DeFi. They migrated 88 million magic to Arbitrum in Q4, et cetera, et cetera. Created hundreds of detailed artworks and minted. So they started launching NFTs in October. They launched their Magic Ohm pair for Arbitrum. So they've actually partnered with Olympus for the Olympus bonding program, which if you're not aware of what that is, you can go to our Substack. I wrote an article all about like Olympus and their bonding program probably 2 months ago, back in December. And it's just basically a way to bootstrap liquidity very, very effectively. And so then they launched the first dual staking mine of magic and treasures, which is very interesting because you can stake a token, an ERC20, and NFTs, which is very interesting. And in both cases, you're mining more magic, right, Mike? Is that accurate?
Yeah, so you can't just stake the treasures without having staked magic, but the treasures you can stake on top of your already staked balance and then get a boosted reward for it.
Okay. Then 78% of the circulating supply committed to our Genesis mine for 2 weeks to 3 months. This is what we were discussing before, partly of the like locking up. So people can lock for 2 weeks to 3 months and get various rewards based on that. And this obviously, is kind of similar to Curve. Obviously, Curve has longer time periods with like up to 4 years.
Yeah, this one, I don't believe they're updated. I know they did change it from 2 weeks up to a year, and the year amount, I believe, is 400% APR.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
Yeah, so there's a good amount of people who are locked for 6 months and 12 months.
And now they've grown so much to where they're now one of the consistent top 10 trading pairs on Sushi Swap. Governance and marketplace. So this is in November, December. They launched the actual DAO itself, so people can vote on the governance model. This is V Magic, again, similar to the V Curve. They launched the small brain collection, which is, I mean, dude, what's the floor on the small brains right now? Isn't it?
It's 5 ETH.
Yeah,
Was that like 2 yesterday or 2 days ago?
These are doing really well.
Yeah,
we can look at some of them here. The floor price is 2,750 magic, and magic is $5.70 right now. So we can do the math on that. And then let's see, several integrations in the works. They are basically talking about different things. They're working with Olympus Odyssey, which a lot of people aren't talking about, which is Olympus's NFT platform. They're doing some interesting stuff. A lot of people are not paying attention to that, and it's cool that Magic and them are working together. I think that could be a surprisingly good platform that for NFTs that people aren't really paying attention to right now. And then we kind of mentioned they started working with the bonding program with Olympus. So for this year, for 2022, their main goals are to expand partnerships, expand the overall metaverse, bridge partner ecosystems. So we mentioned the IBC. I think that's kind of been their main focus there. And then they want to expand Bridge World through the different phases. And we'll probably get into Bridge World a little bit. So let's get into the liquidity, because this is where when we talk about the new primitives, and for what a primitive is for people who don't know when it comes to DeFi, it's essentially a new thing that doesn't exist yet. And they call it primitive because it's like, it's like the very base, like, right? Like things will evolve from it. And so an example of primitives would be like Olympus when they introduced their Olympus bonding program. And then you saw all these different forks come out of Olympus with this new mechanism. Or, for example, DopeX recently launched Atlantic Puts, which we'll probably do a video on separately. But they launched a new type of option that you can use the collateral for under collateralized lending, which is very interesting if that works out. So a primitive is just basically anything that's like new and doesn't exist yet in DeFi. And so Magic has their own kind of, I would call it GameFi primitive. And so let's get into it. So they need sustainable liquidity. And again, I recommend people go read the Olympus article because I wrote a whole explanation on like why liquidity is important and really kind of got granular about it. Basically, the summary is liquidity is like oxygen for a lot of protocols. If you don't have liquidity, you're going to die. So magic is a scarce resource. This is a key tenet of the Treasure metaverse. Mining rewards will continue to have each year, similar to, they kind of took a little bit from Bitcoin in that they have mining rewards and they have every single year instead of like based on a certain block amounts. They do it by year. LP rewards should align with the trajectory to ensure one, ecosystem balance, and two, build long-term sustainability. Achieving sustainable liquidity will involve a progressive reduction in LP rewards to sustainable emissions, reviewed and ongoing. So obviously right now in the beginning, they're going to have higher LP rewards, but over time that'll go down. That's pretty typical. They have the Magic Geom pair, which we've mentioned. Pursuing protocol-owned liquidity, which is part of the Olympus model with their the ohm bonding, and then exploration of alternative liquidity solutions. So in the short to medium term, what are they doing? They launched their Magic Geom pair, which basically ohm holders and magic holders can LP in. And then they're pursuing the Magic Geom and possibly Magic ETH bonds, where people can buy Magic at a discount for providing liquidity. So if the price of Magic is like $5, then someone could get a bond for Magic that's locked for a certain period of time, and maybe the price would be like $4.50 or something like that. And but they do that by providing liquidity. In the medium to longer term, LP abstractions. We believe liquidity can be enriched through creative solutions that abstract away complexity while embedding magic across the metaverse. We will be actively exploring frameworks that gamify and embed composable, meaning working with many different protocols, not just within one, not isolated. Magic LP within partner ecosystems that they are incentivized to grow. For example, wrapping Magic LP as a token with small brains, then integrating token into core economic loops within the small brain ecosystem such that demand for token results in depth in Magic liquidity, but without the user consciously knowing they are adding liquidity to Magic. Other liquidity options, they talked about Tokamak, which we're actually going to have the Tokamak founder on, hopefully in a couple weeks on our podcast. So we'll explain more then. But liquidity abstraction. So this is very, very interesting. Mike, do you want to take the lead on this section? Because this is a section that you were like explaining to me, and it's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. So on the part, so just one more part on the short to medium, the staking of small brands. So that's why we saw the price go pretty much 2x in the past few days, because I believe they came out with an announcement that they are coming up with staking for small brands. So that's another thing too with these like fair launch NFT projects, where it's like, okay, like if you don't have a lot of starting capital and you get on one of these whitelists, and eventually that project follows suit and they get integrated where you can stake these things, it's like you can make a lot of money doing that off of a very small amount of capital. So that's just another thing too that they're very big on, is making sure people aren't priced out, that a lot of GameFi projects are still having issues with. But yeah, so for the short term objective, the gamifying liquidity part, this is where the project gets really interesting and the part that really stood out to me. So just reading through it,
This is like the GameFi primitive part where they're basically inventing something new that no one's done yet. That's really if it works, it'll be a game changer for all GameFi protocols, in my opinion. In the same way
yeah,
that like Ohm all of a sudden became like this new standard for like bonding that a lot of people use.
right. Here, I'll just read it from the top. So the hardest part of proof of imagination is achieving the critical mass necessary for an invented universe to possess gravity. Gravity here, like true gravity, tethers the universe and holds it together by the edges. The gravity of a metaverse is simply consensus that it exists. Without this consensus, the world cannot be said to exist, and none of the assets in this world can gain the monetary premium needed for secondary economic structures to develop. So, pretty long-winded paragraph, and the main goal of this, they state, is this goal. So, the task for the DAO is figuring out how to keep liquidity incentivized long term. This goal can be accomplished by framing liquidity as one of the core objectives of the game. So, instead of using magic as the ecosystem's core token, the project could transition using LP tokens as the power source. Ideally, the user wouldn't even know they're using an LP token because it's called a crystal or a chalice or some other item related to the metaverse. So developing this concept would solve the impermanent loss problem. Permanent loss can be reduced to the idea that financial yield does not compensate for the losses incurred by LPing. But the yield in game worlds we were talking about is qualitative. The value of a great gaming experience goes beyond money and unlocks joy they're experiencing, collecting, collective brainstorming, collective experiencing, and so on. Outcomes that DeFi would never in a million years achieve without NFTs. So,
So here,
oh, go on.
can I give an example for people who probably, I think a lot of people at this point are familiar with DeFi Kingdoms and Jewel, right? So in DeFi Kingdoms, you pay for like heroes in the game, for example, which are like the characters. You use Jewel, which is their in-game currency. And so in that case, you're just literally paying with Jewel, just like you would pay with Magic in this case. But in DeFi Kingdoms, they also have their liquidity pools, which a lot of people were using, right? And you have like the Jewel 1 pool, Jewel ETH, etc. And what they're saying with Magic is that instead of paying with Jewel directly, you would go and put your money in a Jewel 1 pool, for example, which is like the most popular one because it was on Harmony. You would have that LP token from providing liquidity in the Jewel 1 pool. And then that LP token, which again, they said instead of calling an LP token, they'll call it whatever, crystals. And then you use that crystal to pay for items in the game. And so essentially by doing this, they are supercharging the liquidity like you've never seen before on any game.
Yeah, super big. I mean, it's really cool because I mean, think about if you're a new person getting into DeFi or just GameFi, they're trying to strip away all the difficult aspects of it. Like DeFi Kingdoms did a good job of it, but there still was some, nuances where like it was kind of had to know what you were doing. With this, they're trying to pretty much strip away all of that. So and then kind of ingrain the user into this game where like, okay, I'm providing liquidity, but now like they're really emphasizing like the game aspect of it, which they go into in these next few parts where liquidity is weather, liquidity is time, and liquidity as a measure of spatial reach.
Yeah, so like this, what you just read here, framing liquidity as the game's core objective. So instead of the core objective to be acquiring as much of the game's currency, your goal is to gain as much of the game's liquidity, and you pay for things by providing liquidity. It's honestly a pretty genius leap, in my opinion. We can give examples here if you want to keep reading for liquidity as weather.
Yeah, so here, let's read through this. So, for liquidity as weather, we have not prescribed a single Genesis story for legions to create room for other storytellers. One such story could be that legions are settlers on a new world, which is full of peril and balance that they must learn to manage, like any civilization. Low liquidity is akin to extremely bad weather, volatile, cruel, literally an existential threat to the protocol or civilization. Helping a shitcoin is like riding a tiny boat through a huge storm, knowing at any moment your boat could flip and drown you. Growth and liquidity could thematically correspond with stronger structures to protect the legions against the natural world, or an even more fantastical version of this idea would be that as liquidity grows, the legions are increasing their power to control the weather and use it for their advantage. So it's pretty cool. Like they're basically just creating these scenarios that allow people to like want to protect their liquidity.
Right.
And liquidity is time, and I mean we could read through these. It's pretty much the same, pretty much examples, just different scenarios of where they're using liquidity as kind of like this base, like base that you want to protect.
Mm-hmm.
They are running low some
Like
time.
I like the spatial reach one where they say extending on the idea of LP tokens to as keys to unlock adventures, liquidity could also be the key to unlocking new realms. As liquidity grows, the world expands outward. This design would create a very fun collective gaming experience and, more importantly, begin to heal the extremely damaging mentality born out of DeFi that LPing is a PvP sport. And what they mean by this here, let me actually pull up the Olympus article that I wrote, because this is basically the main thing that people, I think, misunderstand about. Hold on, I need to go to ours. Sorry, about liquidity. And I'll just scroll down here. So when you provide liquidity in a pool, a lot of times they're just offering a farm token. And the problem with the farm token is that initially you have a lot of buy pressure, as you can see up here, where lots of people are buying this token because they need it to farm and get the farm rewards. But as more and more people come into these pools and dilute the rewards of the pool, so say I've got $100,000 to give out in rewards for this pool. Well, if there's 10 people, then each person gets 10 grand each, right? But if there's 100 people, then $1,000 each. If there's 1,000 people, $100 each, right? And so over time, the attractiveness of this farm goes down and the sell pressure goes up. Because if I got in early, say I was the first 10, and now there's 1,000 people in this pool, well, it's just not that attractive to me anymore. So I'm going to sell. And this is basically the core problem that Olympus was trying to solve with their bonding. And basically, they were essentially able to solve it. And Magic is kind of doing something similar here on the gaming aspect. And so, for example, like back to DeFi Kingdoms, they're expanding to Crystal Veil is their next thing on Avalanche, right? Well, in this scenario, what they could say is once we hit a certain amount of liquidity, then this new realm, this new Crystal Veil realm will be unlocked and all this new value can be captured. But the community needs to collectively work together to get to that point before that happens. So they're, I wouldn't say completely removing. There's always like a PvP nature to anything, but they are reducing the PvP nature. They're kind of creating a form of 3-3 for gaming, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and this next section is what made me like go like, okay, like I need to own Magic pretty much, because I mean there's so much, I mean we talk about it a lot, but there's so much copy paste shit in crypto. When you find something that hits on a lot of the narratives, for one, from an investing standpoint, but is also trying to do something really cool that could solve a lot of problems in the space, like it's yeah, it gets you, it gets you excited. And this is something that like I read, and I read it over like 2 or 3 times. Like, wow, this is really fucking cool what they're trying to do. Just reading it through. So in Treasure, the role of smart contract developers can completely invert compared to the status quo. Today's developers use smart contracts to tame the chaos of the existing world. Treasure builders could instead use smart contracts to create chaotic worlds that require taming. The game would be to restore harmony to an imperfect world that the developer deviously birthed, with imperfections taking the form of weather, time, and the things we mentioned above. So what's really cool about this is that they're basically gamifying problems that DeFi is facing and having people in the game try to actively solve them without like having to go through like the, you know, tedious kind of like, oh, like I'm a coder type of thing. They're trying to put like these real world problems into a game and then give people scenarios that come together and like form guilds and work together, like how to actually solve these problems and eventually create like use cases that could further advance DeFi.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, so basically they said developers use smart contracts to tame the chaos of the existing worlds, whereas treasure builders could instead use contracts to create chaotic worlds that require taming, which is again how they're removing some of that PvP aspect and making people have to work together in these games and essentially benefit each other. Here, let's keep reading. So the exciting part about this design is that we might discover mechanisms that need to solve problems for which DeFi offered no solutions. Imagine a world built by developers that mimics the cruelty of our own world. Some environments are resource rich, while others are starved of resources. Blight, tornado, and other natural disasters compound this injustice. What good would this serve? Well, players would figure out how to make an insurance protocol that actually works. DeFi 1.0, steeped in a weirdly perverse worship of deception and sociopathic behavior, Sifu, wasn't exactly fertile ground for these kinds of experiments. The insurance industry, done correctly, is an inherently humanitarian industry. It is a collective exercise in overcoming the principal cruelty of the natural world, unequal distribution of tragedy. So, like, for example, I live in Arizona. We got a desert, okay? It's pretty dry. It's hard to grow shit. If, there's like 4 million people in Phoenix. If it were not for the farming infrastructure in other areas of the United States, like especially in the Midwest, it would not be possible for people to live here. It is only because of modern technology, both farming and like transportation, where we can get food brought in, that 4 million people are able to live in a desert, right? So that would be an example of what they're talking about here. And they're trying to do that within a game. So at the end of the day, trustlessness is a bad framework for thinking about crypto. Treasure should lean into narratives that are trust deepening and pro-social. We want game worlds to be not only experiences of joy, but also genuine attempts at making better, fairer systems that require community and coordination to assemble. So, in short, magic should become a natural resource that is unfairly and unpredictably distributed around the Treasure metaverse. The Treasure DAO should attempt the paradoxical, using governance to slowly disempower the DAO and make it less able to hold any sway over the natural world. The ideal outcome is that magic ceases to be a governance tokens that don't even exist. Instead, avatar NFTs function as governance tokens. They indicate the tribe to which the speaker belongs. Each tribe lobbies the DAO, whose actual power has waned significantly, to enact policies that they support. The NFT is the governance token. This is actually pretty similar to the thesis of the butterfly guys when we interviewed them, where as of right now, the Butterfly DAO basically controls most of the, or all of the policy and everything that they're doing and all the new things they're implementing. But he basically said, Sammy, that his goal is that he's not involved, and that the DAO isn't necessarily that involved, and that all of these things kind of happen without even needing governance or very little governance involvement. So Magic is kind of aligned with them in that sense. And then they said, in a nutshell, DeFi governance was about ramping up decentralization and strengthening governance's control of the protocol. NFT DeFi might be about introducing game elements that make governance progressively more difficult. Opposite approach, but it could yield better solutions to the original set of problems. Representative democracies are probably inevitable in game worlds. Take, for example, the group mode for realm conquest. This mechanism results in natural fragmentation of users into groups. Users break off into little groups to build settlements with implicit insider-outsider boundaries. Some sort of political system for that tribe is inevitable. And it's funny because this is mimicking certain political philosophy things. There's actually a political philosophy called patchwork, and I'm not going to get into it, but people can look it up. But it's kind of based on this. It's like the idea that you should have like a decentralized nation where, like in the United States, for example, each 50 state would have like much more independence than they do now, and that people can decide how to govern. So you could have like one state that's like communist and another state that's like pure anarchy type of thing, and people can decide where they want to live. And that's kind of what they're doing in a metaverse approach, which is really interesting. And it's kind of like may the best governance win, so to speak. Okay, so we're kind of at almost 40 minutes now, so we should probably cut this off because we wanted to keep it short. But I think we covered a good amount. They have other long-term things, but the reality is a lot of this stuff won't happen for a while. This is kind of more the important stuff for like 2022. Anything that you wanted to cover before we go?
No, I think we covered it all pretty well.
We may do a part 2 to cover more stuff, but I think this is a good intro for people who are wondering, like, what is so special about Magic? Why do people care about it so much? Because, like, my intro to it was just like, I saw people talking about it on Twitter, and then you start reading a couple threads, and all of a sudden it's like they have this really, really fervorous community that are like super, super into it. Very similar to like I was early in Ohm, and I remember back in like last summer, people were like really, really into it. They're like, no, people don't get it yet. People don't know what's going to happen here. And then kind of similar with Jewel back in the fall, where it was like, what's this DeFi Kingdoms thing? And then Jewel blew up and became the biggest thing. I'm getting similar vibes here. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I just think the potential for this is a little bit bigger than a lot of these GameFi projects, and you're not banking on just the success of the game. For example, with like DeFi Kingdoms, like I still like DeFi Kingdoms. I think it has a lot of potential, but something like this is trying to tackle uh, larger problems. And yeah, I mean, like I said before, like there's not a lot of things that really like pique my interest in terms of like true innovation and like solving problems in crypto. And this one is they're clearly trying to do so in a very creative way that no one else has tried before. So
And as far as pure like valuation comparisons, Magic has gone up quite a bit in the last like week or so, but it's still sitting at 160 mil market cap as we speak. Gala, which is one like that is trying to do a NFT marketplace. Not a lot of the other mechanisms are very different, but this is like they're just trying to do a decentralized gaming and NFT marketplace. They're valued at 2.5 billion, and quite frankly, everything on there is pretty shit. And I don't think they're going to take off at all. But that's like a good comparison where it's like just look at the growth potential there, and then obviously you have Jewel, which has gone down roughly what like 60% from the high, but it's still at like a $500 million market cap, and it was like over like it was almost 1.5 billion-ish at the top. So if Magic were to make a Jewel run, it could easily be like a 10x from here, and that would
yeah,
be like in this near term.
yeah, and I mean, I guess you can even draw comparisons from Magic to things like looks too.
Mm-hmm.
There with Trove coming out, so
Yeah.
yeah, intersecting narratives.
All right, I think that's good for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Again, if there's other stuff you want us to cover, please let us know in the comments. We'd be happy to do more of these. Some of this will be like we'll probably do some solo. Some will be like with more than one person. Kind of depends. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys.
Yep. Thank you guys.